Hello friends, welcome back to the channel, where for the entire month of June we focused on queer authors for Pride Month, but now it's the 4th of July. We're talking about America. That's not true. I would never do that to you. We're gonna do my June wrap-up, which I will say I only completed 10 books this month, which doesn't seem like a lot at all compared to how many videos I made. In my head, I was gonna read 30 books in the 30 days of June, but that was not possible. I'm such a liar. It was 11 books, but there were 2 more that I read but didn't finish, and then there were 2 that I read before the month started, so I read a book like every other day of the month, which is still pretty good. Especially considering I also had to record and edit every single day, I think that was pretty good. But most of these books, I think all except for 1 or 2, are gonna be by queer authors, if you would like to check any of them out, or if you want to see my reading vlogs. I wanted to put it in one place just to see all the ones that I did get to. Honorable mention to these 2 books. I read these 2 at the end of May to get ready for June, but some fun queer books if you're looking for more. But I think we're just gonna get right into it, starting with the only book that I didn't put a video out for, the only one that I didn't document, the only one that isn't fitting into this theme, And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Frederick Bachman. I've seen this author floating around for a while and I've wanted to pick up his books, but when we went to the library I saw they had pretty much all of them and I kind of just had to do it. This is a short story, it's like less than 100 pages, and I think it was Throne of Pages I saw reading it and said that it was just devastating, like it was so sad. And I can tell you it really is. Even just thinking about that book makes me so sad, and it's been an entire month, which I think is really impressive to do in such a short little book. But you're following this old man and he's slowly losing his memories of his life. He's sitting with his grandkid, but you also get to see the relationship between him and his dad. It's just a family story about saying goodbye and memories, and it was just so much happened in so few pages, and it was so sad. I can't even really say anything about it because it's so short that I'll spoil it, but genuinely, if you're looking for a sad little book to read, I highly recommend this one. The second book that I read this month was All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. Because this is a memoir, my reading vlog was less opinion and more just a summary of this book, which was really fun. I really enjoyed doing it. This is the second of their books that I have read, so I already knew that I was gonna like their voice and everything that has to do with the actual writing style. And where the other book was focused on family, this is more focused on personal identity, so I knew that I was gonna like it going into it. And I wrote that this book fills me with such big emotions and it's so overwhelming to read this type of book every single day of the month. Seeing such strongly opinionated people who have gone through so many hard things in life, it was really hard to put myself into those stories every day. But I also feel really good about the fact that I'm able to do it, the fact that I'm even able to hold this book right now. Because in a lot of places, this book is getting banned because people don't want this story to be heard. And that was the whole reason that I was doing this whole thing in the first place, was because Florida specifically is banning a lot of books, and that is simply unacceptable. And I wanted to make these books more accessible, and I wanted to keep people talking about them. And this one was just really special because this is one of the most banned books out there right now. But I wrote down that I can't imagine how beneficial books like this would have been when we were all younger. So many queer people would have been heard and understood, and it's so incredible that we get to have this now. And it's so unreal that people are trying to take that away. I know I'm very much repeating myself. I'm gonna keep doing it, but I feel like I don't really have much to say about any of these because I did entire videos on all of them, but also we're just hanging out. We're just having a chill wind down to finish up the month, because after this video I am going to take a little bit of a break. We'll talk about that at the end. The third book that I finished this month was Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. I've read one other of her books before. I read Loveless and I didn't really like it, so I didn't know if I would like the style going into it because I feel like the other one just wasn't very mature. It didn't really match the age that the characters were, but I thought this one was just a fun time. I really loved how naturally the characters were brought together by their combined passion. The friendship kind of reminded me of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow because they're both coming together to do this big thing, and then along the way they just become really good friends. And it doesn't have to be romantic in any way. It's not. The 2 main characters don't get together, but you can still feel the love that they have for each other. I do think it was a little bit predictable, and looking back at this book I can't even really remember what happens, but I think ultimately it's just a big story about friendship and it was a good time. And I also found myself relating to the characters because the main guy has a secret podcast that he's working on that he doesn't want people in his real life to know about, and he's got this wildly different personality between online and real life interactions, and feel like I've seen that somewhere before. I don't think it was a groundbreaking new story, but I think it was a good time. And I also love how this is tied into it. I thought that was so cool. The fourth book that I finished was another memoir. It's another favorite of the month. Honestly, I think memoirs were probably my favorite to get through just because as much as I love a silly little rom-com, as much as I love falling into those, it is so validating to read real person stories from people who decided that their experiences can mean something for other people. I just think it's so special, and I think these authors deserve a lot of respect for being so vulnerable and putting that story out for other people to consume, because you're opening yourself up to a lot of criticism, but ultimately it's worth it for the people who need it. The fourth book that I read was Love That Story by Jonathan Van Ness. He's one of the 5 people that host Queer Eye, which I still have not seen, very rude of me, but I wrote that this is another sarcastic yet honest queer voice, and I loved how raw the stories are and how open he is with such intimate thoughts about personal identity. I traveled through all of the emotions while reading this book because it's a collection of essays and it's talking about different subjects. Some of them are hopeful, some of them are scary, some of them just want to make you angry, and I think it's all done really well. And I also really respect the authors that are white but call out people of color struggles. I deal with my own struggles because of this, but it's nowhere near as bad, and if I was a person of color, I'd be treated so much worse. I really like when people are able to acknowledge that in their stories, saying that yes, I am struggling and this was a hard thing to deal with, but it could have been so much worse and we need to make it better for everybody. Because it's really easy to take the privilege that you get from one thing and make it seem like that's a universal experience, but as seen with All Boys Aren't Blue, these are different identities that you have to juggle and they're all going to affect each other, and it matters to acknowledge that and to say that people are gonna have a harder time when you have layers and layers. But I think this book is respectful of other people's experiences as well, and it just made me feel better about existing. I feel like I am not saying the words that I want to really all of this month. I've been thinking of words, I can picture them in my head, but I just can't get them out, and I don't know why. I feel like in this video I'm just repeating myself, and there are things that I want to say, but I can't form the sentences. It could just be that it's early and I don't normally wake up this early to record, or it could just be because I'm all talked out. I'm sure you all understand what I'm trying to say. The fifth book that I read was One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. I honestly went into it not thinking that I was gonna like it, because just based on the covers, based on the general premise of all of their books. This is the same author of Red, White, and Royal Blue and Who Kissed Shara Wheeler, which I've heard mixed reviews about both of those, so I didn't really have the highest expectations going in, but I thought maybe this one would be my favorite out of the 3, purely because it reminded me of that one episode of Black Mirror where they're traveling in time. And the one thing that I knew going into it is that it has to do with time travel and also that they do the nasty business on the subway. And before reading it, that already had put me off of the story. I already knew it wasn't gonna be a favorite just because of that. And honestly, I didn't really like this book that much. I thought the plot and the romance felt very disconnected. A big focus was on the relationship, but specifically their physical attraction, and that's just not something that I really look for in books. I like how casual the representation was for a lot of the characters, and I think the friend group was really cute. I liked all of their interactions, but I just didn't feel like it was going anywhere, you know? I feel like it was so focused on making it seem like these two are so into each other that you kind of just you lose the plot a little bit. And it's also a really big thing that the main character's mom is super into detective stuff and trying to figure something out, and August took on that trait and it tries to make that seem like a big deal, but then she's just not that good at it. So again, it was just all this build up with really not a lot of payoff at all. And there was also something at the end where somebody asks to change their name to go by a different name, and I think that would have been a really good opportunity for the book to use that name, and they continued to refer to this person with the same name that they had been using for the rest of the book, and that didn't make any sense to me. If the character is gonna say, I think I want to go by this name now, why wouldn't you as the author then switch to that name to reinforce the idea? If you like New York time travel lesbians, maybe this is for you, but it wasn't for me. The sixth book that I read is Girl Crushed by Katie Heaney, and it's maybe a second chance triangle type of situation, because Quinn was in a relationship with somebody, but they broke up, and then Quinn is attracted to somebody else that's in a band. She tries to get together with her, but realizes that really the other person is the one that she wanted all along. So you're following this journey of her being attracted to the cool band person and maybe getting with her, and then coming to terms with the fact that that's not what she really wants. This is not spoiler, it's all on the back.
And the fact that it's all on the back made it really hard to care about anything that's happening in this book, because if you know the entire plot just from looking at the summary, then what are we here for? Like, nothing much was really added on, you're just given the whole story on the back, and then you follow that exact thing. So it was boring.
I did see a lot of criticisms of people saying that this book or this author is biphobic, so just know that going into it. That the author made some questionable comments on Twitter a couple years ago. Apparently there was an apology, but it wasn't very good. I didn't look into that too much, but something to be aware of. It starts off with the classic getting dumped right before senior year and kind of throwing off the big plans. Same with One Last Stop. It was another book that's focusing on saving the small business. You do this big grand gesture to try and save this place that is so special to you. I will say the romance in this between Ruby or with Jamie, none of it made me feel warm inside. None of it made me feel really excited. I wasn't rooting for any of them to get together. And I also don't think we should try to convince somebody who you think is straight to be in a relationship with you. So, you know, take from that what you will. The 7th book was a big twist from that last one. It's one that I was a lot more happy to read, and that is Felix Ever After by Case and Callender. This book is kind of enemies to lovers. It's another closed-door romance. From page 1, you get introduced to these queer characters who are really bold, they're really confident, they're proud of their identities, which is always nice to see. Again, you're following some seniors who are trying to figure out what comes next, so going to an art college, but you can't pay for it, so trying to get a scholarship and competing over that. And Felix, the main character, is trans, so he's dealing with his own identity issues that come with everything else about this super uncertain time of life. It was a little bit cliche at times, specifically the dialogue felt very forced. It very much felt like textbook, here's what you say to guide somebody along and how to boost somebody up, which was comforting to read in the moment. If that is what you're looking for, I think it would be cozy and comforting to read because it's communicated so clearly, but if it's something that you've heard a million times before, it feels really forced. But I definitely appreciate this author for sharing such a specific experience, because in this book, Felix fears that he's too many marginalizations. Because he's black and trans and he's queer, he's got all of these things going against him, and he feels like maybe nobody's gonna like him because of that. So it's a story about personal identity, and it's a story about him trying to find love, and it's talking about all of these big feelings that come with exploring love for the very first time. Your first times in a relationship, and your first time really getting solid with a friend group, or being more personal with your close friends. Some of these characters make some pretty bad, pretty harmful decisions. The book starts off with some not so great transphobia. That's kind of what the whole plot is going off of, is somebody outs Felix. So while you're dealing with this personal identity stuff, the actual plot of the book is trying to figure out who did this and why they would do such a thing. And I did think that the reveal was kind of obvious again, but it still hurt my heart to read. And I did get chills from pretty much the entire ending because they just love each other so much. I really enjoyed this book. The 8th book that I finished was I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver. Again, this one is heavy with the transphobia. I think this one is probably the worst out of all of the books that I read this month. The parents are very, very cruel to the main character. You're following Ben, who comes out to their parents as non-binary, and they immediately get kicked out of the house. And from there, you're kind of just following them, trying to live life. How they interact with their siblings and with the other people at school, and trying to slowly accept that identity that was immediately shut down by the people who should be there for you. I feel like it pretty perfectly captured young love and friends to romance that happens in queer relationships. You slowly become more accepting of your feelings towards one another. And there's always this unspoken thing that's hinted at where you could like this person, but you don't know if you should say it because you don't know if it'll be reciprocated. I think it handles that pretty well. I thought it was going to be a romance, but I really think it's more a story of personal identity. I think it really goes into Ben's whole life experience with trying to figure all of this out, and you don't get the romance until the very, very end. It's a really, really slow romance if that is what you're going into this for, but I do think it builds pretty naturally over the course of the school year because this takes place for the whole year. The 9th book that I read is called She Gets the Girl. It's written by 2 wives. I can't remember their names right now, but I got it because of that. I thought that was really cute and really special. To think that 2 ladies fell in love and they decided to write a little sapphic love story together, I just thought that was so special. It's very much an opposites attract, fake dating a little bit. And again, I don't really remember what happened in this book. They're kind of blurring together in my head, but it's dual perspective. You're following the 2 main people. They both are in relationships with other people, so I gotta look up their names. This is terrible. Molly is in love with a girl named Cora. She's liked her for all of high school. Now they're going to college together. She hasn't really done anything with this romance, but she would like to because it's a whole new environment. You got another chance. And then you get Alex's perspective, who she's super rebellious. She's super confident. She's doing all of these sneaky illegal things. She's the cool girl, right? And she's dating somebody who thinks that she's not really reliable as a partner. Alex's girlfriend thinks that she's out doing things with whoever, so Alex is on a mission to prove that she can stay loyal. The 2 of them end up meeting up, and Alex Felix decides that the best way to prove that she can be loyal is to get somebody else in a relationship to prove that she was so busy doing this that she didn't have time to get in a relationship with anybody else, which works out just perfectly for Molly, who needs help getting into a relationship with Cora. So you're following the two of them follow these steps to get the girl. It is another pretty slow book. It takes like 20% before the main characters even interact. And I was a little bit concerned because I didn't want this to turn into something with cheating, because they are both interested in other people at the start of the book. I really didn't want it to be a thing of them trying to be with each other while still balancing these relationships. So I wasn't really rooting for them just because I was very afraid of the way that it was gonna go. But it also lets you know that it's gonna be this weird dynamic when you're going into the book. So it's not like I can really complain about that. It was just a concern that I had while I was reading.
Hello?
Yeah.
What are you reading?
I do think the ending action brought me back into it. It made me a little bit more invested in the characters to see how everything plays out with those other relationships. And that's all I can say without spoiling it. The 10th book that I read was A Wild and Precious Life by Eddie Windsor and finished by Joshua Leon after her passing. It's another memoir now focusing on gay life in New York. I was intimidated going into this because it was recommended to me by a friend that I read it, but I'm not great at historical things and I was really scared that I wasn't gonna understand it. I split the video up into 2 parts just because it was taking me a little bit to get through it, and I definitely didn't want to rush through just to have a mediocre summary. Eddie Windsor was a big gay activist, she was a big deal for a legal court case that ended up being kind of what allowed gay marriage in the United States. She's kind of a big deal. Again, I made 2 full-length videos on this book, so I say it a lot better there, but I went into this thinking that it was going to be about the legal battle, and it was a lot more just about falling in love. It was a big book about passion and caring for people and the things that you will do for love. A story about the things that really matter in life. Because beyond all of these political conversations, the thing that we're fighting for is love and truth in our identities. That's the thing that really matters. And then the last book that I read this month was Page Boy by Elliot Page. And I finally went through and tabbed, which is something that I haven't done for any books this month, and I really felt like I was missing out. But this is a non-linear story about coming out in the public eye. Elliot came out first as gay in 2014 and then as trans in December 2020, and you're following both of these identities. You're jumping back and forth in time and how all of that is happening while he's becoming a super famous actor. It was really hard to read at times. Definitely check the content warnings because it doesn't give you any warning going into those chapters. He will just jump right into these super terrible thoughts, things that he was doing to himself, and if you're not ready to read some of those things, it can be a little bit jarring. The timeline can get a little bit confusing just because it is jumping all over, so if you don't keep track of who the friends are and who the relationships are, it can sometimes, you get a little bit mixed up, but I don't think it really impacts the reading experience that much. I have a 50-minute video on this book if you would like to see me talking more about it. It's a really hard book to get through, but genuinely, the gender euphoria that's represented at the end, knowing that he's finally at a place where he's comfortable and confident in his body, it made the whole story worth it. Because you can have all of these terrible experiences, all of these really hard times, but at the end of the day, things can get better. And this book and the fact that he's able to share this story is proof of that. And there we go. Those are the 11 books that I read this month. And like I said earlier, I do think I'm going to take a little bit of a break from posting on here, because posting every single day for an entire month, it's fun for Vlogmas. Vlogs are great, but reading an entire book in that time as well is just a little bit too much. I think I got a little bit too overwhelmed in the realm of videos. I'm also back to college. I'm taking classes again, so I don't have as much time to be reading and recording and editing and all of the steps to do this. And I would really like to prioritize school and figure out how to balance my time before I try to incorporate this back in. I'm not going to be disappearing, you know? I'm still going to be here. I still have a couple more videos that I'm working on or that I have planned with people. I'm going to be putting those out, but I'm not going to have such a strict deadline for any of it. I was trying to post maybe on Sundays and Wednesdays every week, but I think for right now, I'm just gonna post whenever I feel like it. I'm not gonna hold myself to anything because there are just more important things to be focusing on right now. So this is not a goodbye. This is just a casual little, we're slowing down. Thank you to everybody who watched the videos this month or who recommended me books to read. I'm really happy that I did it. It was a lot of work, you know, it did a lot to me, but I'm very grateful that I have the opportunity to read these stories. And now I need to leave to work immediately. So if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more of my videos, you can subscribe to this channel or my main channel, riverbxnd, where I post music content, or my Instagram, Spotify, Goodreads, Storygraph, and TikTok, which I'll have linked in the description. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video. Bye.